These were all CIA-sponsored experiments.
I said, I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains.
And putting little symbolic, cryptic clues and Easter eggs pertaining to the fact that they're still doing it.
These clues include a hidden swastika in the background of the gold room.
What was the setup, what it was being told, and realize that it was a lie all along.
But right there in the narrative, in the dialogue, they're telling you that this was a very real program coming out of those nice folks at the CIA.
Here's Johnny.
So welcome back to Good Vibrations, and my guests today are the guys behind a documentary film which has been doing the rounds on Amazon Prime for a few days now. Some listeners or viewers may have seen it already. One of my guests I've spoken to before, many years ago, and the other one is a first time on Good Vibrations. So it's Jay Weidner and Ryder Lee, who are the individuals behind the documentary A Clockwork Shining. Gents, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Cool.
Thanks for having us, Mark. Really appreciate it, brother.
No worries. So what are your official job titles on this documentary? One of you is executive producer and the other one is the main producer and director. Is that right?
Well, I wrote and produced it, and Ryder directed and edited it. We have kind of the roles that we figured out when we did our last film, JFKX, and it works out. He's a really good director, a really good editor, and I'm the kind of guy that likes to write in a quiet room and figure everything out before we start shooting. So it worked out really well.
Sure. So did you reach out to Jay Ryder, having seen his Kubrick's Odyssey series? Is that the way this worked?
Yes, that's the way that it worked. I had watched a lot of Jay's films. He's been producing movies for a really long time, and I was bringing him on my show to do an interview, and I wanted to watch his content that he had done before. And I was just rewatching The Shining over and over and over again to prepare for this interview with Jay. And I'm like, is there anything that I'm going to be able to find in this movie that people have never seen before? And I had found a few things, and I'm presenting this to Jay on our show together. He was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then a few months later, I hit him up and I was like, Jay, we need to make a documentary about this because I don't think anyone has ever seen the things that I'm seeing in this movie and in the theory that I have. And he was like, yeah, we should. And I was like, cool. And then we actually decided to do another movie before this movie, which I'm really glad that we did because I was able to cut my teeth on that film, which is also up on Amazon Prime, Freevee, JFKX. And that's kind of how it went. And I'm really happy that we did that first film before this one because this one is really a passion project. And it's there's been several people that have watched this so far, and they're kind of mind blown by how much information is in it. And Mark, you've seen it so far. What did you think of it? Did you like it? Well, you're in it, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's amazing. It's I really love the final cut, and as you say, there's so much information in it. And what people are going to find interesting is that there's information that's never previously been presented. So I would say, maybe you agree with me, that Stanley Kubrick is the most analyzed film director in movie history. And I would say that of his films, The Shining is the most analyzed film. So you can go on YouTube and you could be there for hours just trawling through all these videos that people have uploaded with what they consider to be their decode of what's in The Shining. And it's just incredible that over 4 decades on, there's still information that's never been presented before, which appears to be lurking beneath the surface narrative. So that's what your film is all about. And you believe that you found a narrative that nobody else has commented on before. I loved your line in it, Ryder, where you say, The Shining is considered one of the greatest horror movies of all time, but is it really a horror movie? And I think that's the key to what you consider to be the decode that you've taken away from this.
Yeah, and I would like to get Jay's opinion on this as well, because I 100% I think that he would agree with me in this statement in saying that if The Shining was released today in today's time, it would not be considered a horror film. It would be more of a psychological thriller, because really nothing happens in this entire movie until the last 30 minutes of the movie.
One person dies in the entire film.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day. So Kubrick's got this horror movie that he's making, and he realizes after reading the book that nobody dies in the book. And so he had to solve that problem. And I think he solved it by having Halloran being killed. But you think about it, Jack doesn't kill anybody in the book, The Shining. It's weird.
Yeah, it's one of those movies that's kind of like, what is really going on here? And I think that's been the whole thing about this movie since the very beginning. People are just puzzled by all of the continuity errors that's in the movie, which we point out all of the ones that I know about within the movie A Clockwork Shining. There's several of them, and people have been, kind of racking their brain like, why are there so many continuity errors in this movie? Because Stanley Kubrick is a perfectionist. He made sure that everything was right, and this movie has probably the most continuity errors out of any movie ever. And there's several of them: the sticker disappearing on Danny's door, the carpet changing in the hallway when Danny stands up before he goes into room 237, the chair disappearing behind Jack, light switches that will just disappear in one shot and then later on they'll be there, or vice versa. And one of the ones that I kind of forgot about, which is really interesting, is because the external shots of the hotel and the Overlook Hotel within The Shining some of them were shot at Timberline Lodge in Oregon. And those first establishing shots of the hotel, you don't see a maze in the background. There's not a maze in behind the hotel, but then later on there is a maze. So it's like all these things are happening, and we don't really precisely say in this movie, this documentary that we made, why these, the continuity errors are there, but we kind of give you a reason throughout the movie that you kind of have to put two and two together. And it's more like Stanley Kubrick is trying to see if he can get the audience to also question their reality as they're watching the movie, just as Jack Torrance within The Shining is also starting to question his reality and slowly go into delusions. So that's kind of like a subtext thing that's not really stated in the movie, but something that the audience kind of has to figure out on their own.
Yeah, I had a long talk with Stanley's top assistant in 2013, and we were at a conference together, and he wasn't too happy with me, but he was gracious enough to answer some of my questions. And he basically said to me that Stanley just got lazy, and all those continuity errors were just Stanley being lazy. I'm going, come on, man. I mean, really? And he really was saying that, and I couldn't believe it. He was also the one that told me that is because Stanley had him go look at all these hotels around America and take pictures and send them back to Stanley. And when he got to the Timberline Hotel, because he didn't know what he was looking for, only Stanley knew what he was looking for. When he got to the Timberline Hotel and sent the Polaroids back, Stanley immediately called him up and said, "That's it, you're done, come home." So as soon as he saw the Timberline Hotel, he knew he had his hotel. And as we pointed out in the movie, the Timberline Hotel looks a lot like the Lookout Mountain Hotel that was there before the Lookout Mountain Studios were put in Laurel Canyon.
Right.
Which is another thing that's really interesting too, Jay. Sorry, Mark. In Stephen King's sequel to The Shining, Doctor Sleep, because the Lookout Mountain Hotel burnt to the ground in the early 90s. And Stephen King's sequel to the book, The Shining, and also the sequel to the movie, The Shining, Doctor Sleep, the Overlook Hotel burns to the ground. something that we didn't have in our movie. That's kind of a new thing. Yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was the original ending of The Shining. The book was the Overlook burns down.
Right.
The
So they got
Kubrick
there
cut
with
it out.
Dr. Sleep. This is part of the complexity of Stanley. So he will encode all these hidden layers to his movies, and then he puts them out there. And there's a surface narrative that the masses take away from it. They think, oh, The Shining is a movie about a guy that goes a bit crazy due to the solitude of this place, and he gets cabin fever and tries to kill his family. And Stanley knows there's so much more to it. And he's wondering who's going to decode all this stuff, if anyone. And actually, he went to his grave without many of these decodes becoming public. So he never got the satisfaction of knowing that somebody got it, somebody spotted what he put in there, which I don't think many people would be happy doing that. They would want to know that people understood the genius of what they'd put into their narrative.
Well, the closest thing I ever got to channeling was I just gotten back from France in 1999 doing research for the book I was writing. And because I was so busy in France, I didn't know that Stanley had died. This was in March of 1999. And so when I got back to America, I saw that he died. Of course, he was one of my heroes, and I was crestfallen. And it was a Saturday after I got back, and I was sitting on my couch in a snowstorm going, and my wife came out and she said, "What are you doing?" And I immediately began channeling the fact that 2001 was about alchemy, actually, the moon landing. I suddenly had figured it all out within 5 days of Stanley's death. I had my first two Kubrick's Odyssey movies basically channeled to me. And I swear to God, to this day, I think Kubrick's spirit was running around the world trying to find somebody who understood both alchemy and filmmaking so he could tell them about what he was really putting in his movies. And ever since then, I've been on this quest for 25 years now, trying to figure out all of Kubrick's movies. But I really do believe that we figured out what The Shining is really about. And Kubrick didn't believe in the supernatural. He was a complete, atheist. He didn't believe in ghosts or anything. So it had to have been kind of hard for him to make a movie about ghosts. And I think he just chucked it and said, forget it. We're just going to make a movie that has so many layers in it that it'll take 100 years to figure out.
Well, this is the thing I wanted to ask about. So we'll get into what you propose with the Clockwork Shining shortly, but there are many other decodes that people can take away from this film. These were discussed in Room 237. Jay, you were a part of that documentary too, and you advanced the idea that Stanley was basically confessing to having faked the moon landings. There was a theory in there that it was about the genocide of the Native Americans. So now that you believe you found this new meaning to it, do you think all those other interpretations are still there as well? So there's multiple layers to it. It's not just one hidden meaning. There are many that have all been put into this.
Well, yeah. In fact, I think, as I told Rodney Asher, the maker of Room 237, I think all of those theories you presented are correct. I believe it is about the Holocaust. I do believe it is about the killing of the Native Americans. I believe it is about the moon landing. And it's also, and if you think about that, all those things kind of work together. So it's about America. The Overlook is America. He even says at one time, Shelley Duvall says, let's go make America clean again, right? Joking to Danny as they're going to the maze. So I think it's all those. And I think that they all work into our theory on A Clockwork Shining. I think that they all work together. I think Kubrick was trying to tell us many things. And of course, if it's the moon landing, then that's Operation Paperclip. If it's Operation Paperclip, then that's the Holocaust. So naturally, he would want to get that in. If it's also about conquering, the world, then yes, the Native Americans are going to come in and be part of it. As he said, this is Native American burial ground in the movie. And so it's all of those things, but mostly it's about the MK Ultra program.
Right. And you say in the film that Stanley was given this film to make by Warner Brothers. So they said, here's the Stephen King book. We want you to make a movie. And you also observed that Stanley was doing rewrites through the through the filming, the making of the film. It's like he was getting bored with the official narrative and thinking of what he could put into it to spice it up a bit and have a bit of fun and put all these hidden elements in. So that seemed to have been an ongoing process through the production.
Yeah, there's an interview with Diane Johnson, the screenwriter, with Stanley on The Shining, and she expresses her great disappointment that Stanley cut a crucial scene out of the movie. And that's a scene where apparently Jack, which is from the book, where Jack finds a scrapbook down in the basement of the Overlook. And the scrapbook in the book was all these mob ties and crimes and everything that were in the scrapbook. And it would seem strange that he would cut that out since it's such a crucial part of the movie. But if he's really trying to tell you about the MK Ultra programs, then yeah, he's going to toss it. He doesn't care.
Right.
And there's evidence of that with the interaction between Grady and Jack in the bathroom after Grady has spilled the alcohol on Jack. The dialogue between them, because Jack is basically like, haven't I seen you somewhere before? But we don't see him seeing any pictures of Grady in the hotel. He's not on any of the walls and pictures in the hotel. So it makes sense that that scene was there where he finds the scrapbook. He sees that the newspaper articles of Grady killing his two daughters and his wife previously at the hotel, and then that scene was just cut out. But there's still remnants of that between the conversation of Jack and Grady in the bathroom.
Sure.
Yeah.
Ryder, just give us an overview then of what you feel is the main idea that's being communicated in The Shining beneath the surface narrative.
Well, there's several things that I found that nobody else has ever seen. Before Grady spills the alcohol on Jack in the gold room, there's a lady that walks past that has a handprint on her ass. Now, some people can say that this handprint is somehow a part of the dress, but either way, it's still a handprint on her ass, regardless if it's a part of the dress or if it's an actual real handprint. It's still conveying the same thing. And then in the gold room, also when Allman is giving a tour to Wendy and Jack, there's a swastika that's in the background of the gold room into the wall, and I'm the first person to ever have seen that. And the only reason that I was able to see it is because I seen The Shining on the big screen. One of the theaters near me last year during Halloween was showing The Shining, doing a reshowing of The Shining, and I went and seen it on the big screen, and I was like, holy shit. I immediately called Jay after that. I was like, there's a swastika in the background of the gold room, which really ties in with, Project Paperclip, this, and what other people have seen that have pointed out at the end of the movie when the picture on the wall fades to the faraway picture fades to a close-up picture of Jack for a split second. You can see a Hitler mustache on Jack's face. That's not something that we've seen. That's something that other people have pointed out through in the movie, but it all ties together. And then you have the first time that we meet Wendy and Danny in the movie. Wendy is reading the book by J.D. Salinger, Catcher in the Rye, which I don't think very many people have pointed out, and many have theorized and put together that Catcher in the Rye is a MK Ultra Manchurian Candidate style trigger for assassins. And what does Jack do throughout the entire movie? He is trying to kill his family. And then you have the psychic driving aspect as well. Jack is supposedly writing this book for, and Wendy comes in and sees that he's not really writing a book. He's writing the same sentence over and over and over. And then you have the real life example of that with Sirhan Sirhan, which was said to have assassinated RFK in 1968. So Jack is doing his own interpretation of psychic driving within the movie as well. There's many things with Stanley Kubrick that tie over into real life. Like real life is mimicking art, or art is mimicking real life. Like we talk about Sue Lyon in the movie which Lolita was basically about pedophilia, and that was actually happening to the real life actress by Stanley Kubrick's producer, was essentially raping her, which is the lead actress. She was 13 years old at the time. He was in his 30s. Then you have like Shelley Duvall. It's the same thing. And then with the Clockwork Orange, even in the UK and in some other countries, like crime was getting really out of hand. There was murders that was attributed to people watching a Clockwork Orange, which then it was banned. So there's so many things with Stanley Kubrick that tie over into real life scenarios that is really mind blowing to me. It's like, it's either reality imitating art or art imitating reality.
You
Right.
know, the writer Robert Temple is my good friend. He was hanging out with Stanley on the set of 2001: A Space Odyssey when he was a young man, and he told me that he went over to Stanley's house, and Stanley had this big, huge library, and he said he was obsessed with Nazi memorabilia. It was all over his whole place. He was collecting it. He was reading Nazi scientific papers. He told his screenwriter, who wrote the screenplay with him on Eyes Wide Shut, he wrote a book called Eyes Wide Open about his time with Stanley. And he said Stanley would look at him, and he was Jewish, by the way, and so was Stanley. And Stanley would look at him and say, Hitler never said one thing that wasn't true, right? And it caused a big scandal, believe me, when this book came out, because he was essentially saying that Stanley was like favored the Nazis. So I have two sources that say that Stanley was obsessed with the Germans, and then when Ryder found the swastika on the wall in the gold room, I was like, "Yep, doesn't surprise me one bit."
Right. So we're talking about MK Ultra coming out of those nice folks at the CIA, and a big part of what they were doing in those experiments involved LSD, and that's a big part of the narrative of The Shining, according to how you've decoded it. And it's the key to so much. So, Ryder, you've made the comment that there are no ghosts in this film. People think it's a horror movie, but there are no ghosts. And in your view, the characters of Lloyd, the barman, and Grady, the guy that cleans Jack up in the bathroom, who's supposed to be the reincarnation of the original caretaker, according to the surface narrative, aren't actually ghosts. They're characters that have been planted in the hotel as part of the experimentation that's being conducted on Jack, right?
Absolutely. Have you seen the movie Shutter Island with Leonardo DiCaprio?
Yeah.
Where they basically, it's about this detective that's going to the psychiatric hospital to investigate a murder. And at the end of the movie, spoiler alert for Shutter Island, I'm sure people have already seen it. If you haven't seen it, it's a fantastic movie. But at the end, it turns out that all these people are like LARPing. They're LARPing this whole scenario for Leonardo DiCaprio's character, and that's what what we believe is going on within The Shining. All the people that are perceived to be ghosts are really actors playing a role within the movie to try and convince Jack to kill his family. It's an experiment. And that's pretty much what Ullman tells Jack from the very beginning of the movie, between the dialogue with Bill Watson, Ullman, and Jack in the beginning. And that's one of the things that people, think that is really boring about the movie, because it's just 10 minutes of just like straight dialogue of them talking. But Ullman reveals the entire plot of the movie to Jack in that sit down with him. It's so interesting. And I don't think very many people actually, look at that and analyze that part, but pretty much Ullman is like, hey, this isn't a physically demanding job. This is a psychological job. And then later on, when Wendy has confronted Jack after he's getting his psychic driving, he becomes triggered, and he decides to do violence against against Wendy and his family. And in that dialogue between him and Wendy, there, he's talking about how do you my responsibilities to my employers. Like, you have any idea what a contract is? So it's almost like he knows that he's involved in some sort of psychological operation up at the Overlook, and he's trying to convey that to Wendy and Danny, but they don't really understand exactly what's going on. And then you have Lloyd the bartender as well, which you talk about in the movie, Mark, with Frank Olson and Sidney Gottlieb spiking the drink of Frank Olson, and then him later, committing suicide by jumping out of what story, 11th story or 12th story or 13th story, something like that, in a hotel room. And the CIA has been known to spike, alcoholic drinks or any kind of drinks with some sort of hallucinogenic substance. And it's one thing to knowingly take some kind of hallucinogenic, because then you're going to expect to feel the effects of that hallucinogenic. You're going to expect to feel that mind change within you. But when you're unknowingly dosed with some sort of hallucinogenic, you're going to think that you're out of your mind and that you're crazy. And the first thing that Jack doesn't experience anything strange until he takes that first alcoholic drink from Lloyd the bartender, when Wendy walks into the gold room and was like, Danny was attacked by a lady in one of the empty rooms upstairs. And then he goes up there and then he sees the lady, the very attractive lady, turn into an elderly woman. And room 237 is very psychedelic. It's got this, it's unlike anything else that we see within The Shining. Any of the exterior things are purple. They're very vibrant. It's almost like a psychedelic trip. Soon as Jack walks in there, then he sees the old lady, the attractive lady turns into an old woman. And then later, whenever he goes up into the room to meet back up with Wendy asked him, did you see anything in room 237? He said, no, I didn't see a goddamn thing.
Yeah, because he's on acid. That's what it is. And Ryder did a great cut to the very first shot of when he enters room 237, and you get the vibrant purple and greens that are everywhere. And it feels like, you're on acid.
So we're saying that Lloyd and Grady are not ghosts, they're real people. What about the twins that Danny experiences, the twin girls?
Yeah.
And the old hag in room 237, you've said is the actual woman who presumably is real, who in Jack's altered state turns into this hideous old woman. And then at the end of the movie, you've got Wendy experiencing skeletons and this guy with a cut in his head and stuff. So are they straight hallucinations in your view?
No, they're actors. They're all actors. Everybody's an actor.
Including the girls that are all chopped up in the hallway there.
Well, that could be a setup of some kind, a staged setup of some kind. But once you understand that everybody's an actor, it becomes really easy to understand. And this is exactly what Kubrick would do. And so what we're saying is that the Overlook purpose is to do these MK Ultra operations in the winter, and that they bring up a group of people, they hide out in the rooms, and they come out when they're supposed to. There's probably, they're being watched and everything. And this is all, by the way, given away in the ending of The Shining that Kubrick cut out. In the ending of The Shining, Wendy is in her bed and Ullman, the hotel manager, comes in to see her and tells her there's no evidence at the hotel for anything you're saying, right? Why? Because they cleaned it up. They cleaned up the evidence. That's what you do after your MK Ultra operation. And then he says, why don't you and Danny come stay at my house on the beach in LA, right? And why would he do that? And the answer is because you want to keep an eye on your subjects for a couple of months after the experimentation to see what happens with them, right? The aftermath of the experiment. And I believe that he cut that ending out because he realized it was giving the whole ball of wax away, and he didn't want to do that.
Right.
Yeah, I think one of the explanation. Go ahead, Mark. Sorry.
And he throws the tennis ball to Danny. How would he know that Danny had an interaction with the tennis ball in the hallway in front of room 237? He wouldn't. There's no way that he would know that. So what is he doing giving him the ball? Well, he was watching Danny.
Sure wish we could see that footage.
Oh yeah, me too. That's one of the most infamous pieces of lost footage ever. Many people have claimed to have had it. The director of Toy Story people have said that he has the lost footage. But I think one of the things within the movie that kind of explains what's going on with Danny is the when Walter Bosley, the AFOSI special agent of the Air Force, talks about, this LSD aerosol that has been known to be sprayed on entire groups of unsuspecting people. I'm pretty sure that the CIA had like a party at one point where they were just spraying LSD aerosol into the house of the apartment of this where all these people were having a party, and these people would just kind of go out of their minds. So it's kind of implied throughout our movie that it's possible that room 237 is just getting hit with some sort of LSD aerosol, and maybe when Danny goes into room 237 he gets hit with that LSD aerosol, and then that's how he experiences the twins in the hallway, and that might be an explanation for that. But Danny is also very psychic. He's a psychic boy as well. And then when you think of like the Halloran and, them having this psychic connection to each other and the trauma that they've really faced, because you bring it up in the documentary, Mark, that the trauma is the key to unlocking these abilities. And Wendy, throughout the movie, that's how Wendy gets to see some of the things that are happening at the Overlook, is due to the trauma and the mind fracturing from the MK Ultra programs that she's being susceptible to throughout the movie, because it's even implied in the storage room when Jack is in there, between the conversation that he's having with Grady, which Grady is outside of the door, and he's talking to Jack. He's like, Wendy is much more stronger mentally than we had suspected. So how do we break her down to get her on this level to where her mind can be completely taken over by these experiments?
Right. You mentioned
Yeah,
the
because
character
Wendy
Bill
is
Watson
actually
earlier. Yeah, sorry. You mentioned the character Bill Watson, who's in the interview with Allman and Jack when he's first arriving at the hotel. And there's no ostensible reason for this character to be in the film. So it's almost as if they paid an actor to do nothing, because he says virtually nothing. But he's taken a very keen interest in Jack. He's kind of looking him up and down in the interview. And I don't think this made the final cut of your film, but I think your view is that he's a man from the CIA and he's there to assess Jack's suitability for this experiment. That's what's implied there.
Yep, that's exactly right. And he's probably the people from Denver, one of the people from Denver that they keep referring to, which is interesting because a lot of people don't realize that the CIA has always had a operation command center in Denver. Yes, they're in Langley, Virginia, but they also have one in Denver, and it's been there. It's actually becoming their main office. They're moving from Langley to Denver right now. They've been doing it for like 5 years. So somehow Kubrick knew all this.
Creepy ass airport in Denver as well.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Yeah, I originally wanted to put some things in there about Bill Watson and his likeness to Sidney Gottlieb, because they look very similar. But the issue that I kind of ran into was that there's very few photos of Sidney Gottlieb. You can hardly find any of him, like one or two. The two that I have in there whenever you're talking about Frank Olson, Mark, is one of the only two that you can really find. There's very little footage of him. The only footage that I could find of him was after he was playing tennis or something outside, and then he was trying to get back into the building and he was kind of covering his head. So, but yes, we absolutely believe that Bill Watson, because he literally says one or two things like the entire movie. It didn't really make any sense for him to even be there. So it's like he's like an observer, and it's highly possible that he was just there at the hotel the entire time.
Yeah, the actor is actually one of Kubrick's best friends. So he grew up with him. So
he got an easy job on that movie.
Yeah. Kubrick did that a lot. He hired his friends a lot. The little the little short gladiator in Spartacus, that was another friend he grew up with. So he was always hiring his friends for little roles.
What's your view on why the name of Grady changes? Because early on, Allman refers to him as Charles Grady. And when he introduces himself to Jack in the bathroom, he says he's Delbert Grady. So why do you think the first name changed?
Mm.
That's a really good question because he did that also in A Clockwork Orange. Alex has a name change. His last name changes in the movie. It was originally the author of the book, Anthony Burgess. It was his name is Alex Burgess, and then it's Alex something else when he's in prison. So, but in both movies, characters' names change, and it's really that's kind of a mystery. I'm not sure because again, Stanley is such a attention to detail that you would think there's no way that he could make this mistake. So it's just weird that the two mind control movies that he made both have this weird name change on one of the main characters.
Right. So all these things that researchers have found in The Shining, such as your interpretation there and what many other people have observed over the years, presumably Stanley's paymasters, the elites, would have spotted some of this themselves because, these guys are smart and they know stuff that regular folk don't. So I wonder if they would have been aware of some of these symbolic, metaphorical elements in this film. But maybe back in 1980, they thought, oh, it doesn't matter. People are too dumb. They're too profane, too ignorant to know what this stuff means. But they hadn't factored in the advent of the internet and the availability to do research through it. So I wonder how much stuff they themselves spotted, but just let slide.
I think a lot of it, they let it slide. I think he was giving away the game in both A Clockwork Orange, The Shining, Full Metal Jacket, and even 2001 and Doctor Strangelove. So he was always playing fast and loose with the elite, right? Taking it all the way to the edge and then pulling back before he went all the way. And he knew what he was doing. He was probably, in some ways, uh, how do I say this correctly? To me, every movie after Barry Lyndon is some kind of experiment, a psychological experiment. And he's using his ability to make films to make to do psychological experiments on the audience. And I think that he may have been literally working for the man maybe after Barry Lyndon. That literally they came in and said, you're too valuable to just make Hollywood movies. We've got all these experiments we want to try. We want you to do it. And they just feel like experiments. The Shining feels like an experiment. Eyes Wide Shut feels like an experiment. Full Metal Jacket. There's just not regular movies at all. And there's just a strangeness about him that I cannot describe. But I really do believe that he was doing some kind of psychological experiment just because he was bored. I believe that Stanley Kubrick got bored after A Clockwork Orange. That's my theory. He got bored. He wanted to make a costume drama period piece, and he did, and he lost his ass on it. He lost like $10 million on Barry Lyndon. And so then he was at his wit's end as what to do, and he was studying the MK Ultra things that had been announced in 1975. And I believe that Warner Brothers tried to repeat the success they had with The Exorcist by giving a horror novel to a type A director, William Friedkin. And so they gave, and he, by the way, Kubrick got offered The Exorcist too, and he turned it down and did Barry Lyndon instead. And I believe that they kind of said, nah, after the debacle of Barry Lyndon, I think it's time for you to do this movie. We want an A-list director working with the top horror novel, and you're the guy that's going to do it. And Kubrick's like, yeah, I'll do it. And he did it. And then, as we show in the movie, he gave one script to Warner Brothers and said, this is what we're doing. And then he completely rewrote the script while he was shooting, which nobody ever does, by the way. Never do that.
That would be a nightmare.
Oh my God, you want your script locked down solid before you even shoot one frame. And but not Kubrick. Now he's going to keep rewriting and rewriting and rewriting, and nobody knows what's going on. He's changed the story so much Warner Brothers came on the set to observe what was going on. The guy said, I give up. I have no idea what's going on here. Right. And so over and over and over, Kubrick was just fooling him. And at the very end of the movie A Life in Pictures, the story of Stanley Kubrick, a documentary about Stanley, they're interviewing Christiana Kubrick, his wife, and she said, they said, what's your fondest memory of Stanley? And she said, he'll be involved in something, then he'll look at me and go, still fooling them, right? And that was one of his main lines that he would say to his wife, still fooling them. So, he was a trickster kind of in a way.
Yeah. Do you feel he went too far ultimately with Eyes Wide Shut and they offed him?
Okay, so in late 2001, I wrote my essay on alchemical Kubrick, about 2001 being really a movie about alchemy and the four stages of alchemy. And I got a phone call. At first, I got an email and said, here's my phone number. It wouldn't tell me who he was. I worked with Stanley, and it wasn't Leon Vitale. Leon Vitale is the guy that went searching for the hotels. This is another guy, American. And I got on the phone with him for like 2 hours, and he said that Warner Brothers had come to London to screen Eyes Wide Shut. Kubrick and him, this guy, were in the lobby while they were watching it. Kubrick had taken back up cigarette smoking, and he was chain smoking, walking back and forth going, they're going to kill me. They're going to hate this film, right? And really nervous and everything. And then a guy came out, the movie ended, and the guy came out and said, Stanley, come on in. And so Stanley went in, and the guy that was there telling me this didn't get to go in, but he heard this huge argument going on with everybody yelling and screaming and Kubrick yelling and screaming. And then Kubrick was dead 5 days later. I don't know what happened. I know that, he was 72 years old and he was cigarette smoking. So that could be, but the thing is that his assistant, his chauffeur, wrote a book about Stanley Kubrick, and he said that only he and Stanley had keys to Stanley's inner den where he did all of his work. And he said when he came back from the funeral, he walked into Stanley's den, and there was like 20 guys rifling through all of his books and all of his films and everything. They took film, books, files, unloaded, almost like Tesla when he died. And they filled a truck up with it. They never told this guy who they were and what they were doing there. And he said, I was the only guy that had a key besides Stanley. So how did they even get in? And of course, I've been told by CIA that we could break into any place and you'll never know it. So I assumed that they were CIA. And why would the CIA be interested in Stanley Kubrick's work after he died? And maybe because he was doing other things for them that, you're not supposed to know about. I mean, would you really let a director of the statue of Stanley Kubrick go to waste if you could use him? It would seem to me if you'd used him for the moon landing, you're probably going to use him for other things too.
And apparently there was 20 odd minutes of footage from Eyes Wide Shut, which never made the final cut. So again, nobody's ever going to see that. And we can only ever imagine what was in it.
I was the leader of the lobby to get Warner Brothers to release that footage. I had over 100,000 signatures from Brian De Palma signed it, Quentin Tarantino signed it. All these bigwigs were signing this petition to release the 20 minutes that's been taken out. And Warner Brothers basically said, no, we're not going to do it. So they'll never do it. You'll never see it. And I believe what was cut out of Eyes Wide Shut was Nicole Kidman going through an MK Ultra operation and becoming one of their sex kittens.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do Stanley Kubrick. We're really nice to Stanley Kubrick in this movie. We could have put a lot of things in there that would not have shown him in the best light. But we also know that Kubrick was for sure working with the government. We show a document in the movie where, Kubrick is being sought after by the government for some unknown project where, Stanley Kubrick and four others are being looked at, and Stanley Kubrick is being looked at as most promising for this unknown project. And then also at the original credits for 2001: A Space Odyssey, he thanked many military organizations, the Air Force, Langley, all of these intelligence communities, and then later on those were cut out. So it's pretty safe to say that Kubrick, in one form or another, did have contracts with the government. And we also show documents in the movie showing the CIA and the military's infiltration into film production, like the Transformers movie, Tomorrow Never Dies, and things like that. So they have been involved, and it stands to reason that Kubrick kind of put them in there originally in 2001: A Space Odyssey, and then someone seen it and was like, no, 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 you can't be putting our organization, our military organization, and our intelligence community organization names in the credits of your movie. You got to get those things out of there. So he cut them out.
Yeah, it's also interesting that the only when Clockwork Orange came out, there was all this gang violence that was going on in England and America, and I actually saw a bunch of droogs in New York City walking down the street one day, dressed exactly like Alex and his droogs. And Kubrick pulled A Clockwork Orange from England. And first off, a director doesn't have that power. A director can't pull a film. It's impossible. The studio owns the film. He doesn't own the film. And why would the studio pull the film from the place where the action is all taking place in the film? And so my theory is that that Stanley Kubrick made A Clockwork Orange knowing that it was going to create imitation crimes. And he was so afraid that how powerful the film was, because there were a lot of incidences at the time, that he pulled the film in England so that he would be safe.
Or he would look like a good guy.
Yeah, but again, I don't know. There's something about that film, because when I went to go see Clockwork Orange, I was maybe 17 at the time, and I went to see it with a few of my high school friends. And we were all just straight students, and we liked movies, but we weren't like criminals or anything. But after we saw A Clockwork Orange, 2 of the 4 of my friends turned into criminals, started going out and doing violence and robbing people and got arrested. And I always thought, ever since, was it Clockwork Orange that triggered these guys? What was it? And I'm not alone. A lot of people have noticed that the first-time viewers of A Clockwork Orange, males mostly, tend to become kind of adoring Alex and his actions. Because you got to know, here's the thing about A Clockwork Orange. You like Alex. Stanley Kubrick took a psychopath and made him likable. And that is almost an impossible chore, right? To do that. And he did it. And so you're cheering on Alex doing terrible things to people.
Leading to the demoralization and the destabilization of countries, just like Yuri Bezmenov was talking about in the early 80s, which we have a clip of Yuri Bezmenov in our movie, not talking about that exact thing. But if you were to go back and listen to all of his interviews in the early 80s, you'll see that that is the exact same type of thing that they're trying to do. I mean, that what he was talking about back then is exactly what has been happening for decades now. The demoralization, the destabilization, the crisis, and then normalization. Those are his 4 steps to subverting an entire country. And in the movie, we show the clip where it's being infiltrated into the school system, because Cathy O'Brien is like, we've known about this, for a really long time, and it's been infiltrated into the school system. And then boom, up pops Yuri Bezmenov talking about how if we pump Marxist-Leninism ideology into the soft heads of students, then the agenda is going to be complete in 18 to 20 years, because those people that we're pumping this information into now are going to grow up to be the leaders and the people that are going to be creating policy and in control of education in the future.
Right. I saw A Clockwork Orange in '99, So immediately after Stanley had died, that film was re-released in the UK.
Oh,
So like literally the minute he was gone, it was back on release in the cinemas. So
that is it.
yeah. And I went to see it when I was drunk with a friend, and we just spent the whole time laughing. So I wouldn't do that now, but that was me in my irresponsible youth. So,
Yes.
Ryder, how did you decide who you would include in your film to discuss The Shining? So, you've kindly got myself featured in there and you two guys, and there's three others as well. So, how did you decide who you would get to tell the story through their narration?
Well, Walter Bosley, because he was an AFOSI Air Force special agent, and he confirmed a lot of the things that we were mentioning in our film with the Air Force. Basically doing MK Ultra type technologies, and then the Lookout Mountain Air Force Base on top of Laurel Canyon that we talk about. That is a heavy focus of the movie. Cathy O'Brien, because she's a MK Ultra Monarch. Mind control survivor. And in the movie, when Danny sees the twins, there's a poster on the wall to the left. And, I wasn't the first person to see the poster. I'm just going to come out and, say that because I feel like that it's important and to be honorable in this work. I wasn't the first person to see the poster, but I was the first person to decode the poster as an MK Ultra style technology, because everybody else on the side said that it was a minotaur, or that it was a ski resort, or it was referring to Monarch Mountain. No one had put two and two together and thought, oh well, what about Monarch MK Ultra mind control? And that's what really triggered me when I seen that. I was like, holy shit. And then everything else started clicking afterwards. And then I'm finding other things in here, like the Catcher in the Rye that Wendy was reading in the beginning, Jack doing psyche driving, just like Sirhan was doing. And yourself, because Jay knew you. I was familiar with your work, but I'm super happy that we got you in the film, because I really think that it really brings everything together. It would be highly lacking if you weren't in there, brother. And Joe Atwell, because
Joe
of the
Atwill.
Catcher in the Rye.
Yeah, Joe Atwill's the expert on the Catcher in the Rye. I've had many conversations about the book and realized that he had to be the guy that we got, because he really has a great interpretation of this very nasty book.
I learned a
Uh,
lot about The Catcher in the Rye from Joe Etwill's inclusion there. Didn't
Yeah.
know that stuff.
No, and I mean, uh, I personally think Catcher in the Rye should be banned. And now they're making everybody read it in high school. And I don't think anybody should be reading this book. But I'm not against banning books, so I'm not going to do it. But if there was one book that I could ban, it would be Catcher in the Rye. Um, and it's really not even a very good book. And
But it's mandatory reading in schools and colleges. Go figure. Has been for decades.
yeah, I know. I can't figure that one out, except that they're part of the MK Ultra program, just like Bezanov said. And
They want people reading that book.
want people to read it. They want people to get mired in that stuff. And he's really a nasty person. The what's his name? I can't remember his name anymore.
JD Salinger.
Salinger.
The title character of Catcher in the Rye,
Oh, Holden Caulfield.
Holden Caulfield. Yeah, he's not even a very nice person. He's clearly sleeping with his sister, who's 12 years old. He says it several times in the book, right? That he sleeps in the double bed with her, right? And it's like, okay, you're 19 and she's 12, okay, right? And it's like over and over throughout the book, he's just weird stuff goes on, and he goes into this whole thing about he has a certain hat that he puts on, and that's his people killing hat. And he goes around killing people when he wears that hat. And it's like, what are you talking about, right? And then only in the context of Freemasonry and secret societies can you begin to unravel what's really going on in A Catcher in the Rye. And then you find out that J.D. Salinger was in the OSS, precursor to the CIA. He was in Germany at the end of World War II, probably debriefing the Nazi scientists for Operation Paperclip. all of a sudden it all begins to work together. The swastika on the wall and Catcher in the Rye and MK Ultra, and it all just, to me, when we were first discussing this, because I'd known about the Catcher in the Rye, I'd read Joe Atwill's stuff, and then I just realized, oh my God, first time that you meet Wendy and Danny, she's reading Catcher in the Rye. My God, she's like getting, and it's probably Jack's book. He's the writer, so he probably owns that book, and she's just borrowing it and reading it. But still, well, it's amazing.
Sure.
Yeah, I think the Catcher in the Rye is another demoralization and another destabilization of the population, and that's a big reason why it's mandatory reading. I think the Holden Caulfield within the book would be classified as like an incel in today's times. That's what he kind of seems like to me, is like a incel. He doesn't know what's going on in the world. He's trying to find his place in the world, and he's it's kind of like what a lot of these mass shooters are.
Yeah.
MK
And then when you
Ultra
think
again.
of, yes, that's exactly right. Yep.
And the two Catcher in the Rye assassinations happened within 1 year of the release of The Shining. John Lennon's murder and the attempted assassination of Reagan.
Yeah, that
Both
really is interesting timing. Yeah.
really is. And you think about Clockwork Orange and the imitation criminals running around both in England and America, right? And then you have two guys that react to, that are killing two major people, and they both got Catcher in the Rye on him. Mark David Chapman shot Lennon 6 times and then sat down on this little rock bench, and he just started reading it. And the guy said, "You just shot John Lennon." He goes, "Yeah, I know." He goes, "Well, what are you doing?" He goes, "I'm waiting for the cops."
Yeah.
So it's like, okay.
And then in court, he stood up and said, "If you want my defense, all you got to do is read Catcher in the Rye." And then
Yeah.
it's also said that I actually have a book here called "The 100 Most Famous Criminals," and it talks about him in there. And so apparently, a psychologist went to visit him in prison a couple of years later, and the psychologist said that he was still reading Catcher in the Rye.
Have you noticed that Mark Chapman and John Hinckley Jr. look very alike as well?
They do.
You're right.
I was getting kind of confused, to be 100% honest, Mark, when I was making the movie, like, because I had all the images and stuff all like kind of scrambled up, and I'm like looking at both of them, and I'm like,
Very
are
similar.
these the same guy? Like, and I had to go back and check several times and like look it up to make sure whenever we were mentioning Mark David Chapman and John Hinckley, that I was getting the right people when we were talking about them. They look almost identical.
And a young
And then-
Stephen King looks quite like them as well. Back in the day.
You're right. Mark David Chapman looks like Stephen King when he was like 20 years old.
Right.
That's crazy. Yeah,
Crazy.
then there's other things about The Shining we don't mention, like what other movie has two of the leads have the same name as the person they're playing? Jack Nicholson is Jack and Danny is Danny. And then his co-writer, Diane Johnson, has the D and the J as her initials, as Danny and Jack have. And you got to wonder, did Kubrick hire Jack Nicholson because he has the same name as the character? Is there something going on here? Just weird.
Yeah. So your film has been out on Prime for what, a couple of weeks now? So
Yeah.
what sort of reaction? What sort of reactions have you had? What sort of comments have people been making? Have there been any surprise reactions to it at all?
One bum gave me a bad review. He doesn't like me clearly, but everybody else has just given us nothing but glorious reviews.
Yeah, it's been overwhelmingly positive, and I think people are shocked because they are expecting a movie about Stanley Kubrick and The Shining, which is the main focus of the movie, but it really ties in so many other things, which is a big nod to having you, Mark, in the documentary. It's not only about Stanley Kubrick and The Shining, but it's about the music industry of the 60s. It's about the film industry. It's about MK Ultra. It's about the military. It's about all these different topics that are all wrapped up into this movie. And I think that that is really shocking for a lot of people, because some people, they know a little bit about some of the topics that we cover in there, but the way that we present it is, because I've had several people that have hit me up and they've been like, I've been what would be considered awake for like 10 years, and I'm still shocked by watching your documentary. So it's really a testament to the people that are in the documentary and the information that we present.
Yeah, you did a great job with it. Is it ever going to be available on DVD, or is it exclusive to Prime, like ongoing?
Well, supposedly our distributor is going to put it out on DVD. Um, I don't know that they were going to do JFKX and they never did it. So I'm going to really press this one to have it out on DVD because I want permanent, permanent film, and you can't get that on streaming. So the other thing I'll say before we go here is that I had a private showing here in my town with about 10 people who went to see it. And then I had follow-up conversations after they saw it, and they were all shook up. Every one of them was shook up. They were all, oh my God. And then I think what we really did, which the most subversive thing we did, is we used a pop culture icon, Stanley Kubrick's masterpiece, The Shining, to reveal the truth about the MK Ultra programs. So people are going to go to see, thinking they're going to see one movie, and they're actually going to come and get the normie kicked out of them.
Stanley style.
Stanley style.
Yeah. I kind of knew where you were going with it when I filmed my parts, but I didn't know how it was all going to come together. So when I saw it with all the other contributors as well, I was also blown away. I was like, well, now I see the completion of what you thought you'd uncovered with this film. So it really all comes together in a mind-blowing way.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's one of the things that that even shocked me when I was watching the movie, because I watched it so many times, and I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, holy shit, this is the reason why people can be as amazing at whatever it is that they do, and they'll never really get anywhere. That's another one of the realizations from this movie, too. Like, you can be the best singer in the world. You can be the best freaking podcaster in the world. You can be the best musician, the best guitar player. But if you don't have the right connections and the right people behind you, your family isn't involved in the right things, you're not going to make it. And that's a really big realization, and one that hit me really hard while I was making the movie. I was like, oh shit, this is the reason. This is why. So it's I really hope people go out and support it, because it's 100% independent. We put this thing together all on our own, and we know that Hollywood is slowly dying. It's been dead for a while now, and this is the new thing, is independent filmmakers. And I hope people, you can get it on. You should be able to get it in the UK and in the United States. But if you can't get it on Amazon Prime, if you're in another country that doesn't allow you to get it, it's also on Apple TV as well. So if your country allows you to get Apple TV, you can watch it on there. And here in a couple of months, we should be getting it up to where everyone can be able to watch it no matter what country they're in. But it is on Amazon Prime and Apple TV. So yeah.
Were you surprised that Amazon took it? Because we're not talking normie material here. We're talking, some pretty controversial stuff.
I was
Yeah.
not. I wasn't, because I knew that Amazon was. I was more surprised that they took JFKX, to 100% be honest. I was more surprised with that one than because it's coded in a way that we're not actually outright telling you about these things. They're hidden within, like Jay was saying, like a pop culture icon within Stanley Kubrick and The Shining. So it's kind of disguised as and that's kind of what we did with JFKX too, because in JFKX, the first 40 minutes of the movie, is just a history of the JFK assassination. It doesn't really reveal anything new until 40 minutes in. And a lot of people say that, you know, if you're going to talk about really controversial things, don't put it in until 30 minutes after on anything, because the AI doesn't go past 30 minutes. So that's a trick and a technique for anybody out there that produces content like this, or does movies, or even YouTube videos or podcasts. Try not to bring up anything controversial until after 30 minutes in, because they won't be able to do anything about it.
That's a good tip. All right, fellas, thanks for coming on today. Much appreciated.
Thank you, man, for having us. Really appreciate it.
These experiments were done without the informed consent of the patients.
Look at some UFO cases, and the things that are reported tells me that MK Ultra is likely being applied.
In my MK Ultra mind control experience, I was taken to various military, NASA, and DARPA installations for sophisticated mind control programming.
Walt Disney, Marilyn Monroe, James Stewart, Cary Grant, Ronald Reagan. Nobody really knows what they were doing up there.
As well as high-ranking military and Department of Defense personnel.
What people don't realize is that many of the people that worked with Kubrick also worked with Kennedy. This is actually the smoking gun proving that Kubrick was working with the government.